This being that all mathematically perfected economy really is the monetary equivalent of barter. It's the only system or environment in which we can determine what the production of others is worth in terms of our own production, and we can trade so much, being as both parties might be so inclined. But by monetization, which provides us universal universal medium of exchange, so that in effect we don't have to go to a market with a goat and a dog wanting 57 chickens, 3 geese, and whatever else, and not finding anybody who has what we want,
Right.
who will exchange it for what we have. By tokenizing our wealth, and which is what a true economy does. And if you ask almost any person, what is money, they want to say that it tokenizes our wealth, but it doesn't. The money that we are subject to, this obfuscation of money that we are subject to, because it's multiplying artificial indebtedness in proportion to a circulation, which dedicates ever more of the circulation to servicing artificial debt versus sustaining the industry, which is obligated to do so. And that phenomena of disposing ever more of the circulation to servicing artificial indebtedness is something that I've called maldisposition. Maldisposition is a result of the obfuscation of the currency. In multiplying artificial indebtedness, it dedicates ever more of the circulation to servicing artificial debt versus sustaining industry, which is another way of saying, why and how the system collapses.
Mm-hmm.
So long ago, when this idea of mathematically perfected economy hit me in an economics class. I was a very advanced student in mathematics as a young child, and in high school I was put in this economics course, and the teacher one day, he says, he gives us the definitions of inflation and deflation as increases or decreases in circulation per, I prefer to say, represented wealth, and that's a traditional definition. It's only assumed. People have to understand that modern economics is a lie. The whole thing is a lie. It's nothing but a pseudoscience. It's entirely bereft of formal
Mm-hmm.
proof and theorem. There isn't one. A theorem has a proof. The Pythagorean theorem is a matter of a proof that the sum of the squares of the right sides of a right triangle equals the square of the hypotenuse. So economics, so-called, is not only a pseudoscience. Rather than being economic at all, it all revolves about this obfuscation of the currency, which instead of being economic, multiplies artificial costliness upon us until the extents of artificial costliness are even terminal. They completely defeat all potential to production. I mean, it's the exact opposite of an economy, and we're calling it economics, stupidly.
And they haven't even taught monetary theory in economics college for years. They've basically dropped it.
Sure, but because there never was any theory. It's all about lies, and if you don't recognize the sleight of hand, you might absorb it. But the fact of the matter is, in my day in this class, is a perfect example of it. As an advanced student in mathematics, I was, in the second grade, I was put in college algebra courses, and I developed this method of learning where, I would go through the whole textbook, sort of speed read it, look ahead, see what it was, where it started, what parts it had, how they were put together to build whatever it did in the end. Where were we going from where we started, and how did we get there? Get an idea of that, because it made it. I would speed through all this, and shoot, I would hardly understand it at all, but to just kind of get a feel for its parts and all of a sudden, when you got to the end, then you went back to the beginning. The beginning made a heck of a lot more sense.
Hmm.
And so, I would go through to the end quickly, and then I might go through halfway through the book, and then I might go through a quarter, and then I might go through the first couple of chapters, and then I might go through the first chapter again. And by the time I'd done that, the first lesson was easy. And I was, at 7 years old, I'm being, spun off to learn math on my own. A teacher can give me, a few minutes a day is it, and so I'm a little kid, learning college algebra like this. And this method of learning became very important to me. And so when I get this, this textbook for this economics class, which was below my usual curriculum, but it was required. And the book is just as thick as my math books. And I opened this book and I looked through the table of contents, and it looked like, more of a story than a science.
That's right.
And then I went through it, and I was aghast to see that there wasn't a single proof. I had these two just excellent teachers in high school of advanced math and geometry and trigonometry and all. And they were just excellent teachers, and they taught totally by proofs of theorem. So you can imagine how aghast I was when I was like this A+ student in high school, and I'm solving proving the Pythagorean theorem off the top of my head, and so when I get to this economics class, it's like
Excuse me.
It's like Dick and Jane went up the hill, Spot followed. That means that Spot will eventually pass Dick and Jane, and Dick and Jane will be better off somehow. That's kind of how the story is being put together, and it's the truth. That's how it's as if we can multiply wealth without doing anything. Is the idea that they're trying to get you to share in, when in truth you're a smaller fish in the tank, and it's the big white shark that's going to gobble up everything in the end. Meanwhile, you think you might be able to do this, and you're basically a dog chasing his tail, because it's impossible to increase wealth without production. All wealth is the product of production. And so, in fact, you don't even have free enterprise when you have what we call capitalism, which is better said to be perhaps a term that I've heard from way back was British banker capitalism, which is central banking. And a central banking system is mutually exclusive to free enterprise, and so is this idea of unearned profit, because all wealth is the product of production, and the primary object of true free enterprise is just reward for effort or endeavor. You see, I build $100,000 house. That's mine. That's my production. If I rendered all the materials that were involved in it and all, and I erected the entire thing myself, that's my house. You see, and that's the idea of true free enterprise is that man prospers as he would in nature, and this obfuscation of the currency precludes that. But our stupidity of thinking that we can prosper to a greater degrees ourselves by participating in undertaking is our own iniquity, which is self-destructive. Why? Because when we take from the pool of wealth without producing by commensurable endeavor, we're denying real producers of the wealth just reward for their production.
That's right, but that's human nature, and as Frederick Bastiat
it has
points out,
been under capitalism, but in fact, it's I would argue that it's human nature instead to say no. I build a house, that's my house. Just because you came in from the side and wrote out the value of the house on a piece of paper, and for building a house I owe you 5 houses, and for paying you the 5 houses, I'm going to engender a further debt to myself of 5 houses, which I'm going to pay by 25 houses, at which time I've paid, I've engendered a debt of 25 houses to myself. You see, and this goes on and on until I can no longer pay the debts. I'm saying, no, it's my nature. On the contrary, and most people that I know who are actual entrepreneurs who actually want, their desire is to produce something, the thing of their love, their thing of their inspiration, the thing of their ambition. Their human nature is to say, what I produce, I want just reward for it. That's human nature.
Oh, that's fine, but it's still a tendency for people to find the least painful path to do that.
Well, sure that's why.
That's why we're in the situation we're in today.
Yeah.
Because people are saying, well, the least painful path is that. Well, I can live off. Now I've earned a little bit of money. I can make some investments. Or for the business owner who wants to build his business, he's going to hire a bunch of hacks at $8 an hour so that he can live the least painfully, by growing his business.
Well, that's only a consequence of this system, because in truth, all that we really invest in something for is to preserve, is in an attempt to preserve the value of our money.
Right.
When in fact the system is destroying the value of money at an ever escalating rate by this thing that I call maldisposition, dedicating ever more of every unit to servicing artificial debt instead, leaving ever less to sustain the industry, which must increase its prices so much in order to maintain margins of solubility, but which it cannot do because this maldisposition is dedicating ever more of the circulation to servicing artificial debt instead. So the markets can ever less afford the production of industry, and of course this eventually squeezes out the very capacity to sustain industry. So all of this idea of unearned taking is mutually exclusive and destructive, therefore, to actual free enterprise. What most of us desire actually is free enterprise and just reward for our contribution to the pool of wealth.
And something we haven't yet seen is the actual implementation of free enterprise, because it's so manipulated. But just to further your point of the absolute impossibility of this compound interest, which correct me if I'm wrong, it is an exponential system, and the only exponential system that we continue to inflict upon ourselves. If you look at biology, if you look at all the biological functions of everything on the planet, whether it's plant or whether it's animal or whether it's even bacteria, when they go into an exponential phase at the beginning of their growth, they quickly level off. Chemically, the same thing happens. You have a chemical reaction that is very rapid at the starts, but will quickly level off. And even nuclear, there's no such thing. There just is no such thing in the universe as an exponential system that will not self-terminate. And compound interest is no different, except we insist on using it. And the problem is that the industries, the real life industries that we have, whether it's forestry or fishing or whether it's manufacturing, it doesn't matter what it is. And this is what's being played into the hands of the eugenicists, and which has been picked up by the Green Party, where they're saying, well, we need to save the planet, we need to have less births, we need to use less, we need to buy less.
The only way you can accomplish that, though, is if you rectify the monetary system. We can't even afford to do the green energy things we've been fully capable of doing for 15 and 20 or more years.
That's right. And unless you address the underlying issue, which is what we're talking about today, as I spoke to someone last night who's a Green Party, obviously they were green. I said, your green agenda is going to completely leave the socialist side out of it and the eugenics out of it, but your green agenda is going to fail. It must fail unless you first address this other green issue.
Right. And the only thing that I object to is a nuance of the terminology of compounding interest, because, well, you're right, it is interest. It isn't that interest is compounding. It's that this implicit obligation to maintain a vital circulation obligates us to reborrow interest, which
Right.
is how much the sum of artificial indebtedness increases. It always increases by so much as periodic interest on an ever increasing sum of debt. So it isn't really compound interest, it's that a rate of interest against an escalating sum of artificial indebtedness increases the sum of artificial indebtedness even at an inherently escalating rate, which we can understand easily to be ever greater increments of periodic interest on an ever greater sum of debt. But it isn't this idea of compound interest, which is generally applied to examples, for instance, of, what if I saved $1 one day, and this interest applied to what I'd saved over and over again would have ultimately turned that dollar into $1 million in so many years. Well, yes, that, the problem with these examples is see, that sounds like